Welcome to week 5 of the Secret Agent Society program. Hope your kids loved this week's session. It was a bit heavy in some parts in terms of there's a fair bit to go through from the point of view of learning formulas. That's where we're sort of moving to over the next few weeks is coming up with these systems to help your child to solve different problems. So today was the first of the problems that we're solving, and it is the most sort of generic overarching one. And so it's called the decoder, and it's about solving social problems. So we're really looking at last week introducing friendships, this week about what happens when we have problems within our friendships, and later on in the session we start to look at how do we keep conversations going, because that's often a really big challenge for many of our kids, is that our conversations seem to be one-sided, and so the conversation can become over very quickly. And so that's something that over the next few weeks we'll continue to focus on and drill into them, is that capacity to keep conversations going. But first up, we talked about solving problems, and so we used an acronym called the decoder, and they'll have a little red card that goes inside their little blue book, but you can also read it up on here. It's on page 72, and basically each letter stands for a part of the problem that we need to work through. So the D stands for detect the problem and define it. And so when we're detecting the problem, we're working out, rightio, what is this social issue that we're faced with? What is the situation? What has happened? So that we can sort of be the detective and get to the problem of, okay, what's actually happened here? So to do that, we need to go back and reflect on everything that we've learned in the first few sessions. So we're going to reflect on how we're feeling in our own body. Are our hands sweaty? Are we feeling anxious? Are we feeling a bit angry? Are we feeling a bit worried? So we've got to recognize what's happening for us, calm ourselves down first. Then we need to look at the situation we're in. Are there other people involved? Are we safe? Is it a dangerous situation? Am I here by myself? Who else is involved in this? And then we start to look at the other people that are involved. We look at their facial expressions. We look at their body posture. We look at their tone of voice. We look at what they're doing. So not what they're saying, but what they're doing. Because oftentimes people don't necessarily express verbally when they're feeling angry or frustrated, but you might be able to tell from their body language. And so it's practicing all of those things that we learn in the first few weeks about recognizing the non-verbal cues and the other things, social things that might indicate how someone else is feeling. So becoming more aware of what the other person is looking and feeling like. And so that can help us define the problem. Then we need to work out, rightio, well, how bad is this problem? Is it a 1 out of 10 or is it a 10 out of 10? So is it a little problem or a big problem? So we have this problemometer. And so really what we're trying to ascertain then is, are we blowing it out of proportion in our head, which some of us can. We can make a really, what feels like a really big problem is actually a really small problem. So we really start to analyze that and go, well, hold on a minute. Is this a really big problem? Will I remember this in 5 years' time? And if the answer is no, then no, it's probably not a really big problem. And then we start to explore the possible solutions. So that's when we take time to be creative and we think of all of the possible solutions. And so it becomes a real sort of brainstorming exercise. And I'll show you in a sec the tool that we use to support the kids to do that. Then we want to consider the consequences for each of our solutions. So there's going to be pros and cons to each solution, and we want to weigh those up. So it's about helping them analyze their actions and how their actions might affect the end result. And so that's a really good strategy for them to practice in starting to use that frontal lobe and start to think about the consequences of their actions rather than just jump in and do the first thing that they think of. Then we come up with a plan. We go and do the plan, test it out, and then we reflect on it to see how it went. And again, that's a really good practice just for life, a skill for life, to be able to look at how it went and what went well, what would I do differently next time? Do I need to come up with another solution, or did it go okay? And then obviously, like with everything that we talk about in this program, reward, reward, reward. Sometimes these things are really hard to do, and we need to give ourselves a real pat on the back for giving these things a go, because some of them are really tricky. So the strategy that we use, so there's lots of these in your book so that you can work through lots of different problems. So we detect and define the problem. We come up with 3 possible solutions. We weigh up the pros and cons of each of those solutions. We use relaxation gadgets to help ourselves get confident and calm enough to be able to enact the solution. Then we do it and we evaluate how it went. The other thing that can be helpful in here for you to be aware of is that often these social problems require some form of communication to resolve. So if I've upset someone, then we've got to try and come to some mutual agreement. Maybe the problem is that we both want to sit in the front seat of the car. Okay, well, we've got to come up with a solution to this that's going to make us both happy. And so sometimes we need to be able to negotiate. And so just for you to be aware as parents, obviously we've chatted through this with your participant and your child, but on this page, page 75, are some negotiation tactics. So it could be handy for you to have a read through of those, just so you know what it is that we've been talking about and recommending. So once we've taught that to the kids, we want them then, as one of their missions, to think about a problem that they've had in the past week that they might be able to decode and solve, but also something that they're likely to have in the next week, so that then they know in advance, okay, that's something that I'm going to try to solve. And that's what we'd love them to share with you. We'd love them to come home and talk to you about a problem that they might need help to solve this week, so that when the problem arises, you can help coach them through each of those steps. The second part of today's session moved on to talking about conversations. So we talk about appropriate times to have conversations. So obviously it's not appropriate to have a conversation in the middle of class time. It's not appropriate to have a conversation when someone's looking away from... Not appropriate to have a conversation during the middle of a class when the teacher's talking. Not appropriate to have a conversation when someone's looking away from you or when someone's busy doing something else. So we talk about when is the best time to have a conversation. We talk about how to approach someone when we want to have a conversation with them. We can't just barge on up to them and start talking. We've got to hang back. We've got to assess the situation a little bit, stay a good distance away and work out when is the best time to approach. So you get this little blue card with the cheat sheets on here. Oh, sorry, we're about to have some interruptions here with my kids, so apologies about this. Then we move on to step 3. How do we approach them? What cues do we look for in solving that problem? And then how do we approach them without interrupting them? So we walk calmly, we make eye contact, we wait for a break in the conversation, all of those sort of basic steps. And then from there, we're going to move into how do we keep the conversation going? Oh, sorry about the noise. So we're looking at when we ask a question to somebody and they answer it, we don't then, often what our kids do is they'll wait to be asked the question, they'll answer it, and then it'll stop. So it'll be like, how was your weekend? Good. What did you do? Not much. Did you have a good time? Yep. And then that's it. And so what we're trying to teach is how to... Just hold on a second. Boys, I need you to be quiet, please. What we're trying to teach is how to ask a question back. And so it might be, hey, how was your weekend? And they're like, it was great, thanks. How was yours? And so we're creating these circles of communication. And that's what we want to be practicing. And so over the next few weeks in the group, we'll give them lots of opportunities to practice that. But we would love you to practice that at home, because it takes lots and lots and lots of repetition for them to get the hang of it. So obviously we start off with the basics. So how was your weekend? It was great. How was yours? And then we start to think about more complex things like, what are our shared interests? And we move on to talking more about that next week, so that we can ask them things that we know they're interested in. So, hey, I hear you went on a holiday last week. How was it? Oh, it was fantastic. We went to the snow. Oh, I've been to the snow. I love this. What did you like the best about the snow? And so that way then we've got more focused interests, and we're helping them really pinpoint what sort of questions to ask. You can read all about this in a bit more detail if you want to in the book. Really probably not necessary. The main things to focus on is that your mission for this week will be about practicing those conversations, and also reflecting back on those times where you feel angry or anxious, and what relaxation gadgets they can use because that's what's going to help them get through these conversations. If they're feeling really anxious in a conversation, we need them to default back to those gadgets to calm themselves down to then be able to have that conversation. I hope that all makes sense. Sorry about the